Hello, my friends. Today we'll start with the fact that Budanov said that we are moving somewhere, but for now it's still too early to talk about the end of the war.
The most interesting question is where we are right now. I want to hope that we are still on the path toward a fundamental resolution of our war, which, once again, I would like to remind everyone, is the bloodiest and most horrific event and war on European territory since the end of World War II, and certainly one of the bloodiest in the entire, so to speak, post-war history of the world. We are moving forward. It cannot be said that peace will come tomorrow, guaranteed. If someone says that, it is definitely not true, but a great deal of effort is being made. First and foremost, efforts are being made on our side, and on the side of the United States of America. Whether someone likes it or not, this movement exists. It truly exists, and we truly are making progress. Whether we will be able to achieve success in the longer term or not also largely depends on the Russian Federation. You understand who we are dealing with. I don't think any extra words are needed on this matter. To sum up this introductory statement, I will say directly, we are moving forward, and cautious optimism is the term I would use to clearly describe the current situation.
And unfortunately, we're moving not in a positive direction. Foreign analysts have calculated that over the past week, the Russians have seized another 52 square kilometers of Ukrainian land, and together with the gray zone, 115 square kilometers. This is very significant. The situation on the front line remains extremely difficult. At the same time, it's important to note that the situation with the energy sector is also deteriorating, and already 600,000 people have evacuated from Kyiv alone. In January alone, 600,000 people left the capital. Kyiv is on the path to a humanitarian catastrophe. Residents need to leave if they have the opportunity. The Times writes, citing Klitschko, Russia wants people to simply freeze in winter. In some buildings, it is so cold that residents cannot use the toilet because the water has frozen. If the sewage system is not quickly restored along with the water supply, there is a high probability of the spread of diseases. If the Russians continue to obstruct water supply to such a large city, this creates the risk of a total collapse. And Zelensky said that more than 1 million people in Kyiv alone are currently without electricity.
By morning, there were strikes again. Once more, State drones hit an energy facility in the region. In Kyiv alone, as of the evening, more than 1 million consumers are without power. A significant number of buildings are without heating, more than 4,000 apartment buildings. All efforts must be directed toward easing the situation. The situation in Zaporizhia is very difficult. All day long, State drones have been striking the city. I instructed that more assets and more crews be deployed for protection. There are specific tasks to change logistics.
But unfortunately, Russia doesn't plan to stop, and it has been reported that within a week, Russia is planning to launch 2 medium-range ballistic missiles of the Oreshnik type, and Kyiv could once again be a target. The Russian Federation has planned the launch of Oreshnik within a week, Yaradar reports. Whether this will be training launches within the Kapustin Yar test range or launches with independently targetable re-entry vehicles to strike potential targets on Ukrainian territory is still unknown. Among the potential targets is Kyiv. And it appears that Russia doesn't intend to stop in Ukraine because Lavrov claims that NATO countries are allegedly preparing for a war against Russia. Meanwhile, Norway has already begun sending letters to its citizens advising them to prepare for a possible Russian invasion. Norway has sent official letters to thousands of citizens warning about the possible confiscation of property in the event of a war with Russia, the Telegraph reports. This concerns the potential seizure of real estate, vehicles, and equipment for defense needs. Authorities explain this as preparation for emergency scenarios. We are carrying out a large scale build up of military and civilian readiness, said the head of the logistics service of the Norwegian Armed Forces, Andres Jernberg. Overall, because Russia continues to exist and hasn't been weakened by sanctions, problems around the world are continuing. As we can see, everything is moving toward a situation where they may be even more worse. And Trump continues to state he is doing everything to stop the war between Ukraine and Russia.
To settle the final one, I'm trying to do Russia Ukraine. And when Russia's ready, Ukraine's not. When Ukraine's ready, Russia's not. But they're losing 25,000 people a month on average.
Now, let's move on to the situation along the front line and start with the Sumy direction. Here, the Russians have gone quiet and are not carrying out any new assaults, and the front line remains unchanged. In the Kharkiv direction, there are only shelling attacks. The Russians are also not conducting any new assaults here. However, in the area around Vovchansk, activity remains high. There, the Russians are assaulting Izbitske, Staritsa, Gravske, and Vovchansky Hutory. So far, there are no new changes, but in recent days, the front has already shifted quite significantly here, and Ukrainian forces units are now holding the defense at new positions. There are also problems along the border. The Russians are assaulting Dekhtyarne, Krugle, and Nestorne. At the same time, Ukrainian forces soldiers report that the gray zone is expanding here. Kharkiv direction, border. South of Dekhtyarne, the Russians have intensified reconnaissance by fire and covered movement. Their presence has been recorded in a ravine area, and the gray zone there is gradually expanding. According to visual surveillance data, the Russian group was detected in time and neutralized. However, the very fact of the incursion indicates an intention to penetrate deeper, operating in small groups and using terrain features for cover. A similar scenario is emerging in the area of the settlement of Krugle, where increased Russian activity should be expected in the near future. Likely tactics include flanking maneuvers aimed at concealing the main direction of movement, stretching our attention, and creating diversionary actions. This is an attempt to destabilize the sector without an immediate assault, while preparing conditions for further operations. Northeast of the settlement of Nestorne, the Russians also attempted to act covertly, and they were detected and destroyed in a forest belt northeast of the village. At the same time, the outskirts are gradually turning into a gray zone, creating the risk of repeated infiltration attempts and the build-up of forces under cover. Everything points to a preparatory phase. The Russians are probing the defenses, searching for weak points, expanding the gray zone, and trying to impose constant pressure. There are all signs that it's precisely from this sector that the Russians may attempt to launch new active operations. So, vigilance and a cool head are crucial here. Overall, the Russians have managed to open a new direction, and the situation here is gradually worsening. Forces have to be redeployed here to hold the defense, which may weaken other sections of the front. In the direction of Velykyi Burluk, there is still a lull for now. The Russians are not carrying out any new assaults here. In the Kupiansk direction, the Russians are assaulting Holubivka and attempting to break through past Stepova-Novoselivka. However, the level of activity is low and there have been no changes. In the Borova direction, the Russians are assaulting Novoyegorivka, but they have had no success, and over the past day, the front line hasn't changed. In the Lyman direction, the Russians continue the attacks in the area of Zarychne and are assaulting Stavky and Novoselivka. However, here as well, activity has slightly decreased compared to previous days, and there have been no changes of the past day. Despite this, Ukrainian forces soldiers report that the situation is hanging by a threat. In the Lyman direction, the tactical situation is steadily worsening. First, the Russians are constantly putting pressure on our defenses in the Lyman area. Second, only a few kilometers remain before the isolation of the Lyman bridgehead. Third, infiltration by small groups continues, and they are not always neutralized in time. If the Lyman bridgehead is isolated, logistics will deteriorate significantly. The fight for logistics is currently taking place in the areas of Novoselivka Shandrogolove and Kryva Luka Zakitne. In both cases, unfortunately, the Russians are close to achieving their objectives. In the Slovyansk direction, the Russians continue attacks beyond Dronivka in the open fields. They are also pushing toward Nikiforivka and Fedorivka Druga. However, over the past day, they have failed to advance further, and the fighting continues. In the Kostiantynivka direction, the Russians are assaulting the outskirts of the city. Ukrainian forces soldiers they are increasingly detecting Russian forces and releasing videos showing their destruction. Destruction of Russian forward position in the eastern part of Kostiantynivka. The gray zone has been expanded. The issue of consolidation is being clarified. As a result, the situation here is slightly deteriorating. Attacks also continuing in the areas of Pleshivka, Yablonivka, and Rusin Yar. But over the past day, there have been no major changes. At the same time, the Ukrainian forces struck an ammunition depot in Debaltseve in the occupied territory. Explosions and a fire were reported. In the Dobropilla direction, the Russians are pushing toward Torske and assaulting Nikanorivka, but so far all attacks have been repelled and there are no changes. In the Pokrovsk direction, the Russians have focused on the city of Rodinske and are trying to fully capture it, sending in increasing amount of resources. In the Novopavlivka direction, the Russians are assaulting Filia and carrying out Shalin, but so far they haven't been able to advance further, and there have been no changes over the past day. In the direction of Pokrovsk, in the Dnipropetrovsk region, the Russians are not showing significant activity. They're advancing in the area of Oleksievka and carrying out Shalin, but over the past day there have been no changes. In the Huliaipole direction, activity remains very high. The Russians are breaking through in the areas, in the area of the villages of Solotke, Dobropilla, Varvarivka, and Svatopetrivka. and fighting is ongoing on the outskirts of Huliaipole. A large number of shelling attacks are also continuing, but despite this, they are still unable to advance further, and the Ukrainian forces are holding the defense. In the Zaporizhia direction, so far only shelling has been recorded with no offensive actions, and there are no changes along the front line. In the Kherson direction, the Russians have been unable to break through to the right bank, and the situation there remains stable. Meanwhile, Trump is creating a new World Council and has invited Russia to join. Lavrov commented on this situation.
We very recently received specific proposals, the draft charter of this structure, and so on. But this initiative reflects the United States' understanding that even they, with their political and foreign policy philosophy, see the need to gather a group of countries that will cooperate with you in one way or another. Yes, someone might argue that the World Council is conceived and announced in such a way that everyone must obey the United States. That is the situation Washington probably wants to see right now. But I assure you that the administration of Donald Trump, in all the actions currently being discussed worldwide, is a pragmatic administration, and it understands the need not just to unite a large number of countries under its leadership, but also to fully take into account their legitimate interests.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister of Belgium said that Trump is not acting as a partner and that this needs to be explained to him. Belgian Prime Minister Bart de Wever, speaking in Davos, stated that Europe is at a crossroads and must decide whether to unite under pressure from Washington or risk division. He added that the European Union had been lenient regarding US tariffs in hopes of gaining support for Ukraine, but now many red lines have been crossed, threatening NATO allies with military intervention is unprecedented and signals that we are approaching a turning point. We must respond. There is no sense in showing weakness any longer. He also added that the US must act as an ally. Otherwise, Putin will see that the West is not united. Russia's economy is very weak. Their military threat is not very real if we are not divided. But what he sees is that we are divided. Overall, the situation is complicated, and Trump's actions are further destabilizing the world. And that's all from me. So please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all the latest news. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. Bye bye.